Hello and welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Today on the show, Dr. Ann Gillies returns along with our wonderful expert, John Gillies. I was going to say, geez.
That's okay.
3, 2.
You got it.
These are the bloopers you were talking about, John, eh? All right, here we go. 3,
It's
2,
perfect.
and 1. Hello and welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Today on the show, Dr. Linda Blade is back with us. She is a fantastic author, as well as leader, coach, kinesiologist. Her list goes on. We're going to get into her details in just a minute. John Euler, of course, whose show it is with us today, and Dr. Ann Gillies. Let's welcome John into the show first off. John, great to have you with us.
Brad, thank you. Couldn't do this without you, and I'm very pleased to have back at the helm with me Dr. Ann Gillies. She was away on book tour. She is back with us, as she should be. And I'm excited to have Ann introduce our guest for a return visit, because this is such a timely topic. This is a very important topic. This is where the fallout of the trans deception, the trans movement, and why we unmask the trans movement here. This is where we live, and this is the natural result of very dangerous and misguided policies, because it can place, and it does place, women and children in harm's way. Dr. Ann Gillies, would you please introduce our very special guest?
I'm excited to do that. I'm so pleased to be back, yes, and with a stable internet and everything set up again, thankfully. Yes, today you are in for a treat. We are going to be able to listen to Dr. Linda Blade. Now, Linda has a PhD in kinesiology. She is a sports performance coach. She is also the head of Athletics Alberta. So this woman has been there, done that. She understands the whole realm of sports, the arena of sports, so to speak. And she has been trying to expose some of the deviance that she's very concerned is happening within the whole area of trans individuals, men who claim to be women, who are cross-sex identifying and invading, I'll say that word, locker rooms and girls' sports. So we're going to have an interesting interview. So welcome, Linda. We just welcome you to kind of talk a little bit about yourself first, and then talk about those things that you kind of finished the last interview with, and then we'll go from there. How's that?
This is an interesting discussion. I'm looking forward to it because actually, I do want to expose deviancy and potential harm and danger for female athletes. My duty as president of the board and as an elected leader of that association is to ensure that we have fair and safe policy positions and basically the nuts and bolts of how we run our sports organizations, from the tiniest, smallest, youngest of athletes to the masters and 70 and 80-year-olds, like right through the whole lifespan. We are the sports group that manages things at ground level, which is where sport happens. And so I've been engaged in the policy debate at national and international levels as well, because I have to be the go-between person to go to the national capital meetings, the Athletics Canada and the Olympic, and of course they then bring us information from the International Olympic Committee. And I have found it alarming. I only woke up to it in 2018 about the fact that our sport was promoting the idea that a male person could self-identify into women's sports category.
Linda, I just brought up, probably much to Brad's chagrin. He didn't know I was going to do this.
Okay.
Here's your book.
This is my book. Yes. So
this is your
the book I wrote. Mm-hmm. So this is the book I wrote with Barbara Kay, journalist Barbara Kay, and it was published in 2021. And it came about because this whole thing had been revealed to me from 2018 to 19, and then I was encouraged by various individuals, including Barbara, that I should actually write a book about my experience as a sports leader and what my concerns are, looking at, you know, the whole policy issue and what are we really trying to achieve here.
And that's why we're going to encourage people to get a hold of this. It's called Unsporting, How Trans Activism and Science Denial Are Destroying Sport.
Mm-hmm. That's a great name. Great.
Yes, and unsporting, and it's unsporting behavior. And it's not only unsporting behavior by athletes coming into the sport attempting to cross over the sex-based boundary, but it's unsporting, I would say, by officials who are saying things like, well, we can allow a male person to self-identify into the women's sports category as long as they live as a woman for a year, whatever that means, as long as they reduce their testosterone and keep it down to a certain level, as if nothing that ever happened, the things that happened before, that they were born with massive advantages in terms of heart size, lung size, blood volume, muscle mass, bone length, bone density. There's 6,000 variables that differentiate physiologically and biologically, differentiate men from women. And so to just toggle, I've said it this way, it's like male and female are two different channels on the TV, and messing with testosterone levels is like toggling the volume button, the volume dial, to try to change the channel. It doesn't change the channel. It just says, okay, we're going to have a male with a little bit lower testosterone. He can keep all the other advantages, but somehow keep his testosterone down. And somehow that's supposed to level the playing field, which is preposterous. There are thousands of other variables that continue to give that male person an advantage. And so then
an unfair advantage.
Absolutely an unfair advantage. Absolutely unfair. And the advantage goes from anywhere from 9% to up to 50, 60, 160%. You know that a male person in the boxing realm can punch 160% harder than females in boxing. So it goes to astronomical differences. And so we know that, 9% difference even is, you wouldn't even make, you would not advance past the heats. And for example, in the Olympic 100 meters, you would not even go, you'd probably be last in your heats if you're 9% different from, which women would never make it if you had to compete against men in the men's division. So there is a difference in design, morphology. We're not saying women are athletes are worse. We're saying we're all athletic. We have great athleticism, but it's like the difference between a stock car and a Formula One race car. Like there's differences in the design. And people would go crazy if you went to a NASCAR race and all of a sudden you'd see a Formula One car running around in there. The fact is we have different design. It's just it's not like women are men with less testosterone. That's not the case. There's a completely different design. And so to have these men, and I've always said in letters of appeal on policy to national governing bodies, to international governing bodies, I do make the point that on the field, we're concerned, of course, with fairness, but not only fairness, if you're in a contact sport, with safety, collisions, concussions. But beyond the field of play, I've also made the point that what are we going to do and play in the bathrooms, locker rooms, and possibly hotel rooms during the team trips? And as we know, there's a certain, category of trans. Not everybody's this way, but the AGP style, and we're going to probably get into that. The AGP type trans are middle-aged men who suddenly decide they want to self-identify as a woman, even though they're heterosexual, and they come in and they want to maybe have access to women and children. And what's to stop a person who has that kind of ideology of trans? What's to stop that kind of person to suddenly say, like, let's say it's a father of children in the sport team, and suddenly they say, well, I'm now a woman and I'm going to be a chaperone for all the kids in the dormitory. Like, I've said that is a concern of a potential, situation that we need to avoid. But when I say those things, since it's not my background, since deviancy is your background and not my background, I've often wondered, well, how am I? Is this conjecture on my part? Like, what's the possibility that this really can happen? And what are the, what are the percentages, and what are the circumstances, and what do I look out for? And so as we struggle to keep sports safe for the female athlete, I'm really interested in speaking and talking and asking questions as much as giving answers today. I'm looking for advice from you all to help me understand, get the parameters around how to keep sports safe for women and girls, and even little boys, obviously, but everybody's concerned about safe sport. But we need to understand what we're dealing with here, because I don't think we understand it in sports. I don't think we understand the depth of what this is. There is, of course, not every single person, we should never assume every single individual has malintent. But how do we identify those that do? That's never been explained to us in sport. If we're going to let these people in, then how do we know the ones that are authentic, as if that matters at all? But I mean, it still would be unfair. But I mean, how do we do the safeguarding at all if we're not going to have this conversation?
There you go. And Anne, since you've written a very personal book about the dangers of predators, speak to the concerns that are being raised right now, and then we're going to start to kind of then do a deep dive into, is there a concern? It's interesting, Linda, as you were talking, I thought, isn't that the focus now is on safety? So almost gone is the discussion on sports being fun.
Yeah.
Now it is, and gone are the issues of fairness. Isn't that interesting? It's the guys that dress in women's underwear and drag that are decrying that it's not fair. But now when a woman says this isn't fair, she's told to shut up and sit down. So forget the sensitivities of women. It's these deviant guys that suddenly we're supposed to be sensitive to. So gone are the days of talking about fun and even fair, but now we're having to talk about safety. And so, Dr. Ann Gillies, is there a concern when you have these kind of men? Could there possibly be a predator among us? Talk about your book for a moment, and then talk about the dangers.
Yeah, my book is called Damaged by the Predators Among Us. And so it's our own personal story, my family story. And the whole area of pedophilia, which we need to expose. And it's not only sometimes happening right in our home under our watch, but I want to say to you that definitely it's happening in the schools. There is so much happening to predispose children just now to be more open to all of these ideologies and to this whole perspective of boys and men invading girls' washrooms, dressing places, so for me, my story started, 45 years ago. This is just ramped up exponentially in the last 10 years. In fact, we never even had to deal with this whole cross-sex ideology until probably 2012 really is when it started to escalate. 2013, the DSM, John talks about that. But so now what we're seeing, what was already happening, over the last 60, 70 years, which has been a whole progressive sexual revolution and this whole sex is good no matter what idea, we're now seeing more and more perversion happening. And, something, when you're asking, Linda, is this possible? Is it possible for young girls actually to be in a place where they are not safe with these trans identifying people? And I will say yes. And just recently, I heard of a school class trip. And so I think this was grade 6, 7. So, that age, here you are, 12, 13-year-old kids. And so it was a school class trip. It was a weekend trip. And the teachers, it was co-ed. The children were camping in cabins, co-ed. Now, this wasn't specifically, cross-sex identifying boys. let's say that, being placed with girls. This was unilaterally placing boys with girls in a camp situation. This is craziness. And the parents, were they told about this? I don't have that information. My suspicion is that they may not have heard about this before it was scheduled to go. Now, as a parent, while my children are all raised, I can tell you, I would have been hell on wheels if that was my children. Yeah. And yes, we need to protect. And, you know, let's talk about the other side of this too. You know, we're forgetting that these are young boys. You know, we need to protect them as well.
Yes.
What educator in their right mind, what teacher would want to put young boys and young girls who are going through all of those prepubescent changes together in cabins? You know, this is just, oh, well, they have camp counselors. Oh, come on, let's get real. We know what happens in camps, you know, with teenagers, you know, scooting out. And I mean, let's be real. We are putting both sexes at great danger. And people are saying, oh, you're just old. You just don't get it. Oh, yeah, I do. Because, you know, when you expose children to early sexual activity, there are long-term repercussions for those children. And we do not need to see that happening. We need to stop it, because those children end up having all kinds of problems later on. And so you are absolutely right, Linda, to want to kind of blow the whistle on this, because it is ramping up. We're seeing it more and more, these kind of silly ideas. And when you see it in the school system, it means it's already infiltrated every other part of our culture. That's my belief anyways. You look very thoughtful.
Well, because I just thought of something. I've been seeing today a statement from World Masters Track and Field, which is my sport, the Track and Field Associations. I know from my own sport governing body, there was a clause within the new policy that literally said we would be considered to be engaging in hate if we even talk about the idea, if we see a person who appears to be a male but in women's sports and they're self-identifying, it's literally, they're trying to make it against the policy to even talk about it.
This is the ultimate.
We can't even talk about it.
This is the ultimate don't ask, don't tell. Far beyond that, this is the silence of the lambs.
Yeah. Well, this is the new bill too, and I think it's Bill 42 that's coming out exactly to suppress, to repress, keep us from speaking any kind of truth and protecting our children. So what do we have to do? Go around with you know, masks over our eyes, blinders on our eyes to go through life, so we just don't identify what's happening? Well, that's ludicrous. We need to really have eyes wide open. So that's pretty sad.
Yeah, it's sad, but you know what I was able to do is convince them to take that one sentence out and replace it with the idea we have an integrity commissioner where we can go with our concerns and suspicions in a private and, you know, respectful way. So I said, well, why would we put in there that we can't say anything, or that coaches can't question, or athletes can't question? We need to have a mechanism so that they can question, and they can question safely and with, you know, respect. So I think we did succeed in kind of getting that one sentence removed, but it took a lot of work on my part to go through it with a fine-tooth comb and say, look, like, we really have to be careful to say we can't ever say it, to shut down conversation or shut down the ability to ask questions about something we see as potentially dangerous and quite unsafe.
So let me ask you this, Linda. In your experience and what's happening now with in the whole athletic field, I just want to clarify: are our opposite sex identifying boys and men, are they currently allowed into girls' washrooms and change rooms if they identify as cross-sex? individuals, cross-sex.
Yes.
So, so they're allowed full reign, so to speak. In
Well, and here's the thing. We have some associations that will say, to the extent that we control anything, like if you're having a track meet and you book a stadium, the groundskeepers have their own policies about who can use which toilets. But our position as sports leaders is to simply reinforce the whatever eligibility in the field of play. So we might not, as an association, even have the capacity to police who gets to go into the washrooms that belong to a facility that we're renting. But I will say this, there are associations in Canada, many, because the Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sport, I don't know if you've heard about them, Anne, but that whole thing's a big joke. The Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sport is the one that's telling us anybody can identify as anything else on any given day. So a man can participate as a woman one day and as a man the next. And we are not to ask any questions. And when it's within your capacity as a sport to control the facilities and living arrangements, you are to allow people to use the facilities in the gender with which they self-identify. And so it's like removing every possible safeguard that you can imagine. Now, in my association, we chose not to adopt the language they were recommending, but a lot of the sports governing bodies just blindly accepted, oh, it's the Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sport, we'll just do what they say. And so now there's a lot of sports groups across the country who are just adopting this completely unsafe set of proposals for their policies.
So I have this question for you. So in Helsinki, Finland, in January this year, there was a trans man who got to accomplish his childhood dream. Now, I think you probably have a little bit of an idea of who I'm going to mention. I think his name was Mina Maria. I can't pronounce the last name.
That's a trans, in their parlance, it would be a trans woman.
Oh, sorry. There you go. I should know this. Yes. So he's cross-sex identifying 59-year-old man in a skating event. Of course, he fell. It was so difficult to watch.
It was painful. I
felt sorry for him, her, whatever. This cross-sex identified man, because I think he was just set up by the trans community, put in there and said, you need to be in this event. But get this, he's 59 years old. This is a skating event. And I just think about figure skaters. They're young, young guys and gals as a rule. And I would say, they travel with coaches and they have parents around and hopefully they have people protecting them. But then you have this man who identifies as a woman right there in their midst. And it was, apart from his shocking and quite shameful performance, I think he must have been filled with kind of shame over the whole thing, because it was
I doubt it.
Well, maybe not.
He didn't appear.
Not like most people would be. But but here you have, almost 60 years old. What's he doing there? What's he doing there?
Yeah, what is he doing? And here's the thing. So here's what I don't get. As soon as this happens, as soon as there's a male who self-identifies as a woman or a girl and comes into women's sports, instantly, it's all about them. The women and the girls fade into the background, and we all become the template, the white template upon which this person can draw their story. And it so happens that even we in the women's resistance who are trying to speak out against this kind of thing, even we fall into it a little, in the sense that sometimes we are talking all about that man who's on the podium, and then we forget to acknowledge who was left off. What's the name of the woman who got left off, who got left behind? and we don't acknowledge her as much as we should, although lately we've been trying to do that more, find out who was left off the podium and celebrate her. But the thing is, what I'm trying to get at through an understanding, through part of, talking to John and to you, and is just basically trying to get to two questions, at least up front, and then I have more questions later. So how prevalent is this kind of deviance, or like, is this kind of person, the person who will do it just to purposely ruin things for women and girls? So they're going out of their way to not even, they want to have the spotlight on themselves, but also to overtly ruin things for other people. And if you can explain to me how this thinking, like what kind of person does this? Like, I can't even imagine making a fool of myself like that Finnish guy did. What is the ideology, or how does this thinking or predilection come about? Like, what, I think, John, I saw a presentation you did where there's this cascading sort of thing about, it starts with one step and then it goes to the next step. And then help us understand this a little bit, because I don't understand the mentality at all that you would even choose sport as a way to gain access to something where you're going to look ridiculous, but in the meantime, you're asserting your power over women and girls, and you're actually taking away the attention from them and making it all about yourself. How does that even happen? Like, what's going on with these guys?
That's right. Linda, and that will be maybe a discussion that we'll have. If you're willing to stay around for a second part, we can really tackle that in depth over the span of 30 minutes. I'm aware that we're starting to come up near the end of this episode. Yeah. So why don't we, if you're okay with it, let's put the issue of sexual deviance, of predation, of what happens within a man later to get to a point. How about for part 2? But what I was thinking is, we have another coach with us. Mm-hmm. We have Brad. And as you were talking, I thought, it's not just, it is tragic. That is where our focus is as far as the effect on the females. But this is going to go both ways. Yeah. And it's only a matter of time, I can imagine, to where maybe I'll come up with a scenario. A dad who's trying to relive his childhood or something, wanted to have a boy. He's now got a girl and he's raising her. Now, again, I'm hearing people, I can just imagine what's going to come through. I'm just going to say this. So let's say, for whatever reason, we have a dad who's pushing this daughter, or the daughter wants to, but either way, she goes into hockey. But she doesn't want to play girls hockey. She wants to go on the boys team. And now she wants to go onto the guys team, the guys hockey team. And let's say she's 15. Well, per policy, apparently, a coach of a boys team would have to let her on. So let me ask, as far as everything from team cohesion and the ability to concentrate and focus, let me ask Brad Wilder, who is a coach of a boys, is it age 15, Brad?
Yeah, I coach double A boys.
You tell me, we're focusing on the female teams, which we should, but let's talk about just from a coach's perspective on both sides. So we have a male coach. Brad, you coach hockey, a lot of testosterone going on there. What would go through your mind? And then talk to us about the young men. How would it change the milieu? How would it change the feel? How would it be positive, or would it be detrimental? And what are some of the dynamics that would come about that wouldn't need to come about if people just left sports the way they should be?
Well, that's interesting you bring that up, and I do have a perspective on that. Obviously, Hockey Canada, Hockey Manitoba, Hockey Winnipeg, Hockey Alberta, Hockey British Columbia, every hockey association across the country has already adopted females playing boys hockey, and that's okay. As coaches, we've accepted that. We've let them into our dressing rooms. We've made sure to do our due diligence in making sure that the girls were taken care of. Some teams have 1 girl, some teams have 3 or 4 girls. Whatever the number is, it doesn't matter. The competitive level of some girls in hockey is just as competitive for them to be playing boys' sports. They can't find the competition factor in boys' sports or in girls' sports, so they move to boys' sports. They can't find the teammates who have the skill level to be able to play at their level. There's a lot of development in female athletes in terms of hockey over the past, say, 7 to 10 to 15 years. I've watched girls go from not being able to skate or only able to skate with picks to handling the puck better than any boy ever could. Better hands, better decision making under tight timelines and quick second decisions, split second decisions. So I see them wanting to compete, and that's a great thing. So I'll never say anything negative towards a female walking into a boys' locker room and trying to join boys' sports. Where my problem lies is when I, as a coach, am forced to have to allow a transgender person into that locker room because that's never been discussed before. That's where that breakdown has happened over the past couple of years. Now, Hockey Canada is obviously trying to take a stance where they would like to see transgender athletes be included and inclusive as an association across the board. And that's great too. But to be honest with you, we're talking about the less than 0.1% of the population being trans. That being said, how many trans boys are going to walk into a boys' hockey room and put up with that kind of situation or that kind of environment or that kind of atmosphere? You mentioned it earlier, John, testosterone. These boys are going through puberty themselves. As they mature, comments and things like that come out of little boys' mouths all the time where, little Johnny said this and little Johnny said that. And, there's always a little Johnny somewhere who's saying all those wonderful things. So how does a trans athlete fit into this? That's where I'm not sure at this point, because they haven't really given us some sort of guideline that way. They've said to be inclusive and allow them in, but I don't see them showing up anyway. So then I start to go, if they're not coming, why are we getting prepared for all this like there's going to be some big time invasion of trans athletes showing up in my hockey dressing room? They're not. I don't think they'd be able to take the rhetoric or the abuse as well. And we call it abuse only because at this point in time, it would be looked at upon as abusive. But the reality is, I still live by the rules of sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. So, you know what? This is a tough sport. This isn't swimming. This isn't, track and field. This is competitive, hard, fast hitting, aggressive, angry, all the time kind of sportsmanship. And while we can be, shaking each other's hands at the end of the game, I always say there's no friends in hockey. Your friends are left at the door and you get out there and you play aggressively to try to win the day. You want to go to school on Monday and go, we lost. Or do you want to walk into school and go, hey, that was a great game and we finally beat you? I mean, that's camaraderie. That's sportsmanship to me as a coach. So again, this trans athlete thing is, to us coaches, it's all just confusing. I don't know where to put that person. If somebody did walk in, what dressing room would I put them in? Would I put them in the dressing room with the female athlete who's playing on the boys' team? Well, that doesn't work. Now they're one-on-one over there. There's only the two of them. So that doesn't sit well. How many dressing rooms are we going to need to have?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess that's where my confusion is as well. I think every sport group that is where it is very sport specific, which is the one thing the International Olympic Committee did get right, that every sports federation needs to decide on their own parameters. Because, for example, World Rugby realized, because of the contact, which would probably be the same as hockey, if you have a high-speed contact, especially post-pubertal youth or young people who are already going through puberty, to have one male on the pitch, which would be 10 times worth if it was a girl in the middle of men. But if it were, one male body in amongst the women, the chances of serious concussion, neck and back injury goes up instantly to 30% and more. Like the fact that you're going to be risking injury because the bodies are different and the contact is very dangerous. I would say it's quite dangerous to have a female body self-identifying into male sports, in contact sports. So it's almost unethical just from a possible physical damage point of view. And this is what we've found. We've found most of the trans identifying people and non-binary people who are born female, they choose to stay in women's sports because they know they're never going to win, and they're going to be an incredible danger going into the men's spaces. And so that's kind of where I stand right now. I find it sort of uneven in the sense that women's sports, we are already very accepting of the trans within our midst, in terms of like the women and girls. If somebody is born female and wants to identify as a boy, that person a lot of times, and that's happening very frequently. I have talked to mothers in British Columbia. There's so many young soccer players now in the girls' soccer where one of the players appears to be a boy, but it's just a female athlete who's transitioned or trying to appear to be a male. And non-binary, they're staying in the women's sports because they know they can't win or can't even make a team any other way. So what I find is really weird is that even though the female athletes, the young girls, are very accepting of a trans identified or non-binary female in their midst, somehow we also have to absorb the male ones. So the question is, why can't, like I have a question for you, Brad, why cannot, if a young man decided to be identifying as a girl, as a woman, but is male born, shows up and wants to play on the men's hockey team, why can't the rules of no bullying simply apply? And why does the female contingent have to absorb the problem that's really, we've already accepted the trans men, the trans identifying female athletes in our midst. Why can't the boys accept the male athlete who wants to identify as a girl in their midst?
Well, I agree with you. Bullying is a definite issue there. I think that's a case that each coach is faced with every single year of their career coaching. So I agree. You have to combat that first and foremost. But we do have a lack of understanding at this point, and I guess that's what the trans movement is somewhat trying to rectify, is to put their message out there that we should be inclusive and that we should be accepting. We never had a problem with any kind of entertainers before who were trans or acted trans or wore a dress. Nobody's ever complained about an entertainer that way. We took it as entertainment. Yeah. But this is taking it to a different level and a different place now. It's we have to do something that isn't normal for us. And we call it normal in the sense of just normal, family coercion, and in terms of the dynamic within a family. You have a son, you have a daughter, they remain a son or a daughter typically. Now we're seeing this transition, and this transition is bleeding over into sport. And as coaches, we're confused. I'm always confused. I have to worry about the bullying, and I have to worry about the cell phones, and I have to worry about what's going on at school with these players. This year alone, I had a situation that, blew my mind. A boy took another picture of another boy in the dressing room. The cell phone came out. The mom got a hold of it. The mom was really upset. The mom took it to a place of upper management or upper hockey, directors and stuff. And, it came back onto me as a coach. And was I the one that was wrong? No, I wasn't wrong. The boys knew not to take out their cell phones. Those directives were laid out at the beginning of the year. But, that's going to happen in the course of a season. What happens when a boy takes a picture now of a trans person in the dressing room and it gets online? Does that escalate this to a criminal charge? Because the mom whose boy was taken a picture of was elevated that to a point of criminality and called the police. Right. The police had to go to the school. This is just in the last 4 months for me. So I've seen a lot of this in my 20 years. I've seen parents upset. I've seen players upset. I've seen coaches get fired. I've been a coach who's been fired. Let me say it that way. And not for anything that I've done wrong. But because we are put under such, I want to say pressure, but there's also a level of commitment that we have to provide to these players and to the association and to the parents. When you think about it, I've got 17 players on a hockey team. That's 34 parents, 17 players. I'm responsible for 50 people's emotions on this roller coaster of a hockey ride. It's not, I ran today and I did okay. It's, holy crap, this shift, that shift, the next shift. Parents in the stands clocking how long their kids are on the ice for. Oh, my Johnny didn't get that much time either as the other guy. And, you know, you got to defend and defend and defend and defend. And what a year. What a year. But we had a good season. And it was because of parents who actually, I want to mention this because it was parents that actually made my season easier this year. And that was something that was a good thing. And the parents made it easier because they understood what was going on. They had their talks with their own kids. We coaches did our own talks with our own parents and our own kids. So when you get into that dynamic of it, everybody's kind of on board. Everybody kind of buys into that idea. And I think that's what the trans movement's trying to do here, is they're trying to get us all to buy into that idea and that movement. But the reality is, I don't see it fitting. Girls should play girls' sports. Boys should play boys' sports. And if a girl has the ability to play boys' sports, I agree with the whole thing of move them over, let them play. But when it gets to the point of, we'll say, body checking, and you know that body checking in hockey is where the body and the physical aspect of things come in that you were talking about. It's huge. Yeah.
High speed.
So that's where those girls now, I have a neighbor whose daughter is exactly that way. She started out playing girls hockey. She hung out with her friends, but she elevated very quickly. When she elevated up, she found that the kids that she was playing with, the girls that she knew for the last 5 years, weren't elevating. Well, do I want to keep playing at that level? Dad's going, mom's going, well, come on, let's go play with the boys. You'll have a great season. So she goes and she plays on the boys' teams. There's never been any problem there.
No, okay, that's great. But as long as there's biology-based, sex-based boundaries, even in that situation.
That's correct.
And so if John, if you don't mind putting up the title of my book again, because I want to respond with two things about that title. If you can put that up there again, I'll explain what I'm talking about here, because I think it's an appropriate thing to actually add. So if you notice this title of my book, it says Unsporting, How Trans Activism and Science Denial Are Destroying Sports. So the thing is, the first thing I want you to notice is it's not that I'm saying the trans person will destroy sport. It's the activism. It's the demand that we somehow play by a new set of rules that are identity-based rather than sex-based. So that the activism is what could be putting us at risk, and demanding things that we have no verification. So if you say we have to let somebody in based on their identity alone or their self-declared identity alone, we are now in the realm where we're not acknowledging biological sex, and that gets into very scary territory. Then the second thing is, of course, that's part of the science denial. And the reason it destroys sport is exactly what you're talking about, Brad. It's what I said in the book. It's not just a matter of a male-born person destroying a girl in sport, which could happen. It's the fact that the officials and the coaches involved, the officials on the ground, if it's going to be hate, if it's going to be considered hate or something else about, where our sports are run a lot by volunteers at the grassroots level. The moment everybody, whether it's you feeling uncomfortable or an official who shows up and volunteers their time as a timer or a measurement person in track and field, the minute our officials and our people who are involved in sport at the grassroots level, as soon as they feel like, well, what's the point? I'm just going to get charged with hate, even by just talking to somebody or asking a question. Are you in the right category? When we can't speak, we lose our volunteer base, and that's going to hurt girls and boys in sport, because everybody's walking on pins and needles. Who needs that? You volunteer for sport to give back, to appreciate it, enjoy the sport, and we're turning this into a contest of human rights, a contest of who can say the right words, a contest of who can buy into what ideology better than the other person, a contest of mutual accusations. This is what's going to destroy sport. It's
if you think a parent was upset about the amount of ice time their kid got, wait until it becomes a trans issue.
Exactly.
This is going to blow up like I've never seen before at some point, all because us coaches don't know how to handle that situation properly. And they want to train us to handle it properly. But my point is this: I don't understand how I'll ever be able to accept that in this situation. Okay? Because ultimately, we coaches, we aren't going to coach anymore. Flat out.
That's what I'm saying.
They're already starting to walk away because of all the rules and regulations and all of this crap that we have to deal with. And enough is enough already. I don't need to be talking about a trans boy in the dressing room or having the boys pick on that individual or anything like that at all. And I sure as hell don't need a girl raped. Yeah.
And I'm saying this is where it's all going. We're walking into a situation where, because some person who considers themselves to be progressive and happen to have the power in Ottawa puts down these rules, the new sets of rules for all of us, that we all have to jump through these hoops. There are people who will not get their level 1, 2, or 3 or whatever NCCP certification, coaching certification, without signing off on the fact that they believe in this ideology. You actually have to sign things that say you believe this stuff. So
it's a new religion. It's a new religion.
You have to do it as an assistant coach now too, you guys.
What was that?
My son took training this year to become a coach. He's 18 years old. He coached with me this season. I asked the association prior to us accepting the coaching position whether or not they would have any kind of a trans indoctrination, is the way I put it, with regards to this coming season and the way that they're teaching the coaching level, the level 1 and level 2 coaching for beginning coaches. And they said, oh no, that's not probably going to come in for a couple more years yet, but it'll get here eventually. And I went, oh, okay. And I was questioning because I had another guy who wanted to be a coach, and he was like, you know what, I'm not getting involved in all this if they've got all that trans stuff in there. And he said that to me. And I said, okay, I understand. I said, I think they're headed that way, but let me find out. So I asked the question. They said no. Well, the guy said to me, you know what, I'm just going to walk away and I'm not interested. So I ended up going to my son and saying, son, do you want to be my assistant? He says, sure, I'll come and coach with you, Dad. I said, great. Here's the courses you have to take. He went online. He started taking the courses through Hockey Canada. And there's the section on the transgenderism right in there. It's already there. They told me that it wasn't coming in. And they said that it wasn't going to be implemented through Hockey Manitoba or Hockey Winnipeg, but it's already implemented at a national level through Hockey Canada. So what? Like, they're lying to us. They're trying to maintain their coaching levels, and coaches are starting to figure it out and walk away. That's the bottom line. They're quitting.
That's why sport is getting destroyed, and that's all in the book. That's what I'm talking about. All of this complexity, when all we have to do is get back to sex-based boundaries and reality. And we can describe and proscribe the various zones and zones of operation, let's say. And I think it's the only way we're going to save sport is if we get back to biology-based, sex-based language and boundaries in sport. That's what I'm advocating for.
And, Linda, here's the other thing with all of this whole equality stuff. All we need to do, is kids just need to learn to be kind to one another. It's not about all these other identities. If we're kind, and teach them kindness. We used to do that. Teach them manners, teach them kindness, not teach them preference of you prefer this person above the next person, because that's what we're doing with the trans ideology. And we're elevating one group of people who aren't, these kids, there's no trans child. They're just children who are very confused.
Yes.
And have a lot of other extenuating stuff happening and being, told all kinds of stuff. But if they could just act like children and just play like children with some guidelines,
Listen, some of this is bleeding down, you guys. Some of this is bleeding down from our school systems. And our school system, from the gym classes to the principals to the minister of education, it's still bleeding down into our hockey systems, into our athletic systems, all throughout. And this is all because of what's going on in our school system. So we want to attack this. Well, guess what? It starts at the school level. It starts with the Minister of Education for Canada. It starts with our local people as well. And we need to start implementing and going after those individuals for holding them accountable for this too. Because I tell you what, as John has said many times, we are not against trans, gay, lesbian, bisexuals. We don't care about your sexuality here. What we care about here is that you keep pushing it and forcing it on our kids. And you're doing that not only in our schools now from kindergarten through grade 12, but you're also coming after our kids when they're trying to do their own thing on their recreational time that you teachers have absolutely zero responsibility for at all. So stay out of our lives.
Yeah, and that's where the ideology comes in as far as being promoted from the very top of Canadian government and all of these other governments in the world who are trying to be progressive. So I think that the more we are able to talk about the complexities that we're dealing with at that ground level, the more we can talk about and be aware of what is the situation and what's causing this. I think the more that we have an educated mind to be able to get together with other coaches like you and me, Brad, and just really hash it out and try to figure out what is the way forward so that we are protected as coaches and officials, as well as the children and everybody else is safe in that same environment. So we have a very clear, what we need right now in society is very, very clear boundaries and kindness. Yes, Anne, I agree with you, kindness. But what we found as women is we're supposed to be the kind ones, and men can do whatever these males can do whatever they want. So the kindness has to be across the board. It has to.
Yes,
we have weaponized the idea of kindness, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
And, that's right. Linda, it's not abdication,
Right.
Kindness is just being, unilaterally kind to each other, but that doesn't mean you get walked over. Like that's
right. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's in the words of the great Alvin Louis, by the way. That's Alvin Louis right there. 100%. That's a total comment and a quote from Alvin Louis.
Cool.
That is correct. And
Good.
This is
it's
what is
talking,
so
I'll tell you.
Yeah, and this is what's so powerful about unmasking the trans movement, because we begin to see not just the fallout. That is what we've been talking about on this half, or the first part of the episode, Linda. Mm-hmm. These are the practical, real world implications and fallout, the disruption that is being wrought in the lives of coaches, in the lives of kids, in the lives of athletes, in the lives of parents because of this. And Linda, what you referenced is what we will pick up on the other side of this in part 2, which has to do with really behind the scenes. This is about the blurring and breaking down of boundaries. And who benefits from that? Predators do. And we will look into whether or not the trans movement, as it makes its way into sports, does it facilitate the predation of vulnerable women and children? We will look at that next time. Brad?
Excellent.
Well, thank you very much to all of you for being here today, Dr. Ann, Dr. Linda, John. I'm sure I'm going to say Dr. John one day soon. This is Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. I'm Brad Wilder, your host. You can find all the information you need to help be resourceful yourself and get involved. Go to unmaskingthetransmovement.com. We have multiple videos there from great guests, panel experts, and our webinars are going to be starting very soon as well. You can find out all the details at unmaskingthetransmovement.com. Till next time, I'm Brad Wilder, and I'll see you soon.